I know one statistic that has really blown my mind is when you look at city management, 13% of city managers are either women or people of color. And I think that says a lot about how our systems and how our cities and local governments are managed when you have that big of a disparity. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed as well.
Great.
What I found recently very helpful is just having a dialogue. Having that dialogue with a very diverse group and having them understand where people of color are coming from and what our experiences have been like. I engaged in a Zoom call on Sunday, and speaking as a mother, what that fear is like every time your child leaves the house. I don't think a lot of people understand what that's like. And I saw a quote the other day that said, if you interact with the police and you don't have a fear of whether or not you're going to live through that experience, then you don't understand, what the Black Lives Matter movement is from. And so I think just having those candid conversations and a forum for that sometimes is even more powerful and effective. Just so, because it's one thing to see the signs and to see the police brutality, but when you have colleagues and peers that have those experiences, it kind of breaks down some of those us versus them mindset. Like, I know this person, I work with this person every day, and I never understood before, what it was like for you. I think a recommitment to values such as equity is very important. I oftentimes feel like equity is has become one of those cool buzzwords, but there's a lot behind it. Ensuring that people who don't have adequate resources, that you're at least considering them and trying to level the playing field for them as well. So especially in times like this, when we're hit, hard with economic challenges in terms of funding, how are we still committing to lower socioeconomic communities? How are we committing to vulnerable populations, and making sure that they don't get left out as we plan and as we seek to bring in revenue? Are you still committed to offering scholarships? Are you still committed to, providing resources and things that they may need in these difficult times? And I think when the rubber meets the road, that's when you really see what organizations really believe in and how you can commit to those values on a day-to-day basis, regardless of what's going on in the world. So things like that, I think, are helpful. Like I said, our organization is still looking to provide summer camp for people at this point, exclusively for people with SNAP, TANF, free and reduced lunch. And I think that speaks volumes to our management and our leadership in the city, that regardless of whether or not, funding is coming in, this is what we've committed to, and this is what we're going to maintain regardless of what's going on. So things like that, I think, help the community maintain that trust, and it helps your colleagues see, okay, this is not just a buzzword, it's actually something that we live by. Those things mean a lot.
That's excellent, Debbie. And I know that this is kind of your first formal involvement with GP Red, and I really appreciate you being here. And I know we have an advisory board meeting tomorrow that you'll be part of for GP Red. And I just encourage, what we're trying to do is figure out, on one hand, we don't want to duplicate. If NRPA is going to pick it up, or state associations are going to have these types of movements or initiatives, obviously we want to support that, but not duplicate. On the other hand, we're really looking at how do we fill the gaps in certain ways. So maybe if you want to think about that, and maybe we can have that conversation again tomorrow with the National Advisory Board. And then also, for all the Greenplace staff here, are there ways that we can bring this to our clients across the country? I mean, we've got over 60 active projects going on right now around the US. What is it that our clients need, on whether we're talking about funding or we're talking about things helping to find solutions to deal with the racial tensions? How do we help have these conversations?
So as leaders, looking kind of on a, both for our own communities and on a national basis, you talked about the fact that we need to kind of set that individual culture. And how do you, when you're working with your staff, how do you kind of promote to make sure that individually they are on a path of awareness in education and admitting ignorance, because we all say stupid things. I agree with that.
We do.
Yeah, I'm petrified. I'll say something stupid all the time.
Believe me, if you've been friends with me, I always joke with people, do not put me on speakerphone unless you're giving me a heads up. Well, for me, coming from the community, as I shared with you, coming from Suffolk, Virginia, serving as a director there for over 15 years, I was able to really build my team intentionally. I think that that is important, to build your team intentionally. So I not only looked at the backgrounds and educations of the individuals that served in my department, I was very aware of our racial makeup because I believe your agency needs to reflect the community by which you serve. And it was difficult, I'll be honest with you, as it relates to stereotypical job duties. So what I would have, I had mostly Caucasian males were my park rangers out in the parks. And so then in my recreation centers, I had mostly African-American females that worked in the after school and summer camps. And then my administration was just very diverse, white male, African-American female. So, but I had received complaints, you're not diverse enough. And I would get from HR, I said, but you have to put us all together. And my entire department was one of the most diverse departments in Virginia. So when I came here to South Carolina, to Richland County, first of all, I thought that Virginia was the South. I learned really quickly that it was not. So when I moved here, and I moved into my agency, and it had unfortunately had been through so much turmoil from nepotism, fraternization, sexual harassment. A lot of issues had plagued the agency, and I knew that coming in. And that's really why I wanted to come. I wanted to come to be a positive change, not only to the community, but to help heal the staff. Well, when I came in, it was very different for me, and it still is. It was majority African-American staff. And I was like, whoa, wow. But then I looked at the makeup of the community. I said, okay. But at the same time, I was very honest that for me, diversity was important, and that I will be seeking to diversify the administration. My board knew when I came in, and it was not just going to be diversity based on race. It's going to be gender, cultural backgrounds, coming from different communities. So I got a gentleman that joined us from Arizona. This gentleman joined me 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago. And he is 7 feet tall, Caucasian male, walked through those offices. And myself was like, wow. I said, let's meet Matthew. But when I talked to Matthew, we talked about in his interview, Teresa, it's important to do that. Like I said, Matthew, you're coming to a community that is majority African-American when it comes to the staffing, but I need your help to help diversify and bridge a connection between us and, for instance, the baseball community. Because it's mostly Caucasian. You gotta recognize it and talk about it, Teresa, is what I'm getting to. Is that I'm not gonna sit here in front to you and say that this particular group that I was working with baseball, every time I opened up my mouth, girl, they would look at me, yeah, right. She doesn't know. 15 years, what? One, I'm a female. And so then second, coming in as an African-American female from the North. So I knew that culturally, I was not, that didn't work. It wasn't working effectively. So I said, you got to diversify. Got Matthew in. Matthew knows recreation. He needed to learn Richland County. And this young man has helped bridge gaps just in 2 months. But that's because amazing. I was open to it and I'm okay with it. You can't be like, well, that's not fair. I'm going to make him accept me. I'm going to make them take me for my 15 years. That wouldn't have worked. I had to recognize I needed a balance. So that's what we do as leaders. You got to recognize you need a balance, feel comfortable with having a conversation with your staff and your recruits, and then let them come in and be the people that you brought them in to be.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. You know, one of the things, we do a lot of public meetings, and it's the same thing, you know, as we're going into communities, like we just did a big project in Stonecrest, Georgia. And most of my staff are, on this project, just by luck of the draw, ended up being middle-aged white women. So, okay, we're in Stonecrest, Georgia, where it's primarily African-American, highly educated community. And we all do, though, no matter how well we know what we're doing, if we come in there and start talking, we don't have a position of trust. And so And so we had that conversation, very open conversation, and say, we need to have representation so that we can, when we walk in, we only have an hour. I can't build trust. They can't know where we're coming from. So we have to have the conversation. We have to start with kind of a visual representation of trust, recognize that it's still there, and then we can start to have the conversation and get people to open up and talk about the real issues. But I agree with you. It's upfront saying, look, I know we look different. We don't have time to have people know what we think.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to, we just have to really be able, but have the conversations with people saying, hey, I need you to come in and help. And, and sometimes we talk about it, and it's hard to have these conversations when you're saying something like, I need you to front the team, because
you don't want someone to be offended, because it's not like you're not valued from, your abilities. So you're right. And I had to basically, I think before you said, you have to be honest in saying, let's talk about baseball.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah. So when you talk
about, you need him to front. Yeah.
Yeah, but you talk about baseball and you talk about the demographics, you talk about the communities, and then you say, okay, well, how would you deal with this? And then I think that it's important too, as leaders, when we're dealing with some of our community groups, we need to also encourage diversity amongst them. We're fronting them our facilities. A lot of times we're doing background checks, we're training coaches. And I think that if we're not willing to say, hey, baseball is not as a diverse sport in this particular community. How can you help us as a community expose children that may not have the options that your children in your leagues may have? And then I get them to do camps in those same communities. And, I'll share with you a quick story. I'm dealing with a particular league, and I came in and the town manager said to me, he said, we have these apartment complexes that are now called, they're the highest crime in our community. And your recreation center sits in between, along with the baseball league. We feel you need to put up a fence. I said, a fence? Yeah, so we can keep those children that are disrupting baseball, that are causing the crimes and the issues, we need to keep them separated. I was like, wow. Or you need to come up with some programs. So I'll be honest with you, Teresa, I absolutely love these conversations. So I said, sir, first and foremost, what we need to talk about is the fact that what has occurred in your community is that 400 individuals were displaced from public housing downtown, and now they live in your community. Let's start here. So now you don't have the same homeowners. Now you don't have the same backgrounds. So let's talk about the new community that you have. Now, Parks and Recreation can't do it alone. Let's bring in the police department. Let's bring in the school division. Let's figure out, why are these children making this facility a bad place to be? And then I went to the athletic association. Let's street team. Let me walk with you. Let's walk through this community and get children to register for baseball so that they have ownership in the facility and won't destroy it. So it is, we as leaders have to, again, have that difficult conversation and then talk about what can we really do to solve the issue. But a fence was not the issue, was not going to solve that issue, Teresa. That would have created an us and them mentality, and I had to speak up. And if we don't speak up, what would have happened? Now, the community looks at me and our Parks and Recreation Department as a barrier, not a bridge. So now we're going to do a community day, and then what happens? COVID. Anyway, I just think that if we see these things in our communities, we have to say something and then be a part of the solution. My daughter asked me, Mommy, why aren't we protesting? I have a 22-year-old. She said, let's go out. And I said, baby, for me, I want to be a part of that policy change. I want to be a part of that work behind the scenes. And I'm not saying anything against protesting. And I think that I know for a fact, being in America, it is a blessing to have that right to do so. So what I do, I pull from that energy and I try to work behind the scenes to help educate and make long-term change in our community.